I'm Synthia Rovida. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I am bringing you guys an exclusive update in the Dylan Rounds missing persons case. This information has not been covered by the news yet. I'm sure it will later today or tomorrow, seeing as they were granted media access to court documents a few weeks back. Today, Trina A. Higgins, the United States prosecuting attorney, and James Brenner's firearm charges filed new discovery documents. Discovery is when a prosecuting attorney files documents that are a detriment to the person being charged with a crime. Again, this is just the firearm charges. However, also a few weeks ago, in the firearm charges against James Brenner, court documents were filed that specifically named him as a person of interest in Dylan Rounds' disappearance. So it's kind of like both of these incidences are being combined in court documents. I do believe, and this is just speculation on my part, but I do believe that the documents that were filed today are a segue into official charges eventually being filed against James Brenner for the disappearance of Dylan Rounds. I want to revisit the firearm charges from a couple of weeks ago that had a small section in it that named James Brenner as a person of interest, and then we will get into the new documents that were filed today. The defendant was squatting on property belonging to SH and RI. That is adjacent to DR. DR is Dylan Rounds. Dylan Rounds was reported missing on May 30th, 2022, and his whereabouts are unknown. The defendant is known to have had contact with DR and is a suspect in DR's disappearance. A search warrant was executed on the defendant's trailer revealing black powder firearms equipment. DH, Don Haley, was interviewed by the FBI and admitted that the defendant asked him to hold black powder firearms and a .22 caliber Winchester rifle. The defendant hand-delivered the rifles to DH and asked him to hold them for him. Based on the James Brenner firearm charging documents, he was named an official suspect in the disappearance of Dylan Rounds. Candice Cooley, Dylan Rounds' mother, gave an interview to DutyRon yesterday, and in that interview, she said that when her and the family showed up on May 30th to look for their son Dylan, that James Brenner was adamant that he had to move the grain truck. At that time, they were so confused and worried about Dylan that they didn't really think about him saying this. But in hindsight, she said in that interview with DutyRon that she believes that he was trying to give an explanation for why his fingerprints would have been all over the grain truck. Now we're going to go ahead and look at the court documents that were filed today. United States of America, plaintiff versus James Brenner, defendant. The United States of America, through its counsel, hereby files its second certificate of compliance with its discovery obligations in this case and request for reciprocal discovery from the defendant. So I just want to remind you guys that a prosecuting attorney will not file something that is going to help the defendant. They will only file things that are a detriment to the defendant's. If the defendant's attorney has something in response to those things to rebut them, then they will file them at that time. So all of these things that were filed today are a detriment to James Brenner's case. Involved parties and description. James Brenner, criminal history. James Brenner, prior conviction. James Brenner, advice of rights. James Brenner, consent to polygraph. Donald Haley, advice of rights. Donald Haley, consent to polygraph. Elaine Price, emails. I'm not quite sure who Elaine Price is, but I do know that Donald Haley was named a person of interest back on June 20th in a police officer's report. I covered that in my last video. At this time, he has not been named a suspect. He is not in jail. So it appears that he's potentially being used as a witness against James Brenner. Down here it says reports from the FBI for a case, reports from the FBI for polygraph exams, reports Maine State PD prior RE Brenner. That is referring to a case that I was going to play some audio of that has James Brenner's voice on it, but also the part of the recording is the prosecuting attorney describing a very violent act that he committed. And this is not an act that has been covered in any other coverage regarding Dylan Rounds. Like a lot of people have brought up the attempted murder. A lot of people have brought up the assault from last year. I've covered those things, but this specific event is very violent and it's an additional event to add to his violent history. Photographs and description. Dylan Rounds, rental property from January 28th, 2022. Walmart, receipt and product. Walmart, surveillance stills, 4/9/2022. This is just speculation on my part. I feel like this photograph of Dylan Round's rental property and then the Walmart receipt and the Walmart stills are potentially telling us that maybe James Brenner had something in his possession that belonged to Dylan Rounds, which could strengthen the charges that may potentially be filed against James Brenner and Dylan's disappearance. Audio and video, Kevin Bibbins, interview from June 30th, 2022. James Brenner, interview from June 16th, 2022. James Brenner interview, polygraph from June 20th, 2022. James Brenner interview from July 5th, 2022 during transport. Donald Hately interview from June 30th, 2022. Donald Hately interview from July 7th, 2022, polygraph. Elaine Price interview from July 12th, 2022. Dylan Rounds rental property, January 28th, 2022. Down here, it talks about how the defense counsel has been notified of all of this evidence that has been submitted. It says statements made by the defendant and others, police reports, phone records, electronic evidence, including body camera footage, documents and photographs obtained during the investigation. The United States reserves the right to introduce in its case in chief all tangible objects, physical, documentary, and electronic evidence, and all other evidence provided, made available, or identified in discovery. As additional discoverable materials become available, such material will be provided within a reasonable time. Then it goes on to basically say that the defendant has the right to his own inspection or copying or photographing any of the items that were described above. It's just kind of more like law, relevant to law and discovery. And it also says that this stuff was submitted to James Brenner's attorney. So all of this new information is really important because, as I said before, I do feel that this is a potential segue into converting this and filing new charges against James Brenner for the disappearance of Dylan Rounds. Whether or not that happens, we will see. I will update you guys periodically depending on whether or not something new is filed. But that's what I have for you guys. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.